So, every couple of years, the same question pops up in the sport of cycling. Should team radios, communication between the team car and the rider, be banned in this sport? In today's video, I'll take this question on from multiple angles. Who wants to ban radios in the first place? Do riders want radios to be banned? Does removing radios from cycling improve races in terms of entertainment? Or does it actually risk the safety of the riders? All these questions I'll try to take on today. Anyway, let's start off with the basics. How are team radios used today? Basically, the rider has a radio device in a pouch in their jersey or within the jersey on their back, and that allows them to communicate to the team car, who can also communicate through a radio transmitter towards the rider. So there is communication between rider and team car. Right now, almost every single race in this sport is ridden with radios, except for the World Championships and Olympic road race. Now the UCI, the governing body of the sport of cycling, wants to ban or restrict the usage of earpieces and thus team radio in the sport, in every single race. But why do they want that? Firstly, the UCI believes that removing earpieces or restricting the use of them will make cycling less predictable and thus more entertaining. Now, in my opinion, yes, it's true, unpredictability makes cycling races better. That's a fact, but not this unpredictability. By restricting earpieces, you're making both the rider and the team more blind for the ongoing situation in the race. On the rider's side, what is the gap between the breakaway and the peloton? Yes, every now and then, every few kilometers, there's a motorbike that comes by that says the gap between groups, but we've seen in multiple occasions during the Olympics and the World Championships road race that riders don't know the gaps. Next to that, if a group of 20 riders goes up the road, do I have a teammate up there? Who knows? I can't see it from the photo in the peloton. Who is in there outside of a teammate potentially? Every now and then, a motorbike comes by with a list of numbers of which riders are in that front group. Do I need to know every single race number of every rider in the race by heart, going into every single race to know who's in that group? That is crazy. But it's not just the rider, it also makes the team car more blind of what's happening on the road. For example, I've got a mechanical of a rider of mine in the peloton. I'm in the team car. Normally, that rider would tell in their radio towards me and say, yes, I need a front wheel, I've got a front wheel puncture. And as a consequence, we stop by the side of the road, we fix that mechanical, or we give him a new bike, and then he can continue on and get back to the peloton. Without earpieces, that rider cannot communicate towards me, and as a consequence, firstly, I might not even know that rider has a mechanical, so he might be on the side of the road. I look to the left for a second, then we ride straight past him. That has happened at the Olympics this year without earpieces for certain Warenskjold of Norway. So that situation is a real situation. But also it lengthens the time of a bike change because we don't know what the issue is with the bike before I arrive at the rider in the first place. It almost sounds like the UCI wants to make the riders and the teams as blind as possible, so as much chaos in the race as possible, to have random outcomes, but sorry, that's not cycling. That's not the unpredictability that I love in this sport. Basically, the unpredictability that I love in cycling is, for example, Victor Lafay in the Tour de France 2023, climbing with the best on the first two stages, taking home stage 2. That's unpredictable, but amazing to see. Our team's doing crazy tactical stuff with satellite riders, etc. You won't see that without earpieces. Col du Granon stage in 2022 Tour de France was a fantastic stage. That's a tactical masterpiece. You won't see that without earpieces. Anyway, where was I? The second reason that the UCI is trying to ban race radios is to reduce match fixing. That's at least said in the 2017 bid by the UCI boss for his position. He was bidding to become the president again for a new term, and that was one of the things he wanted to do. Remove or restrict race radios to reduce the possibility of match fixing. And I gotta be honest, I don't know how large the issue of match fixing is within cycling, but I'd be shocked if it has anything to do with race radios in the first place. Now on to the third reason, the final reason, in my opinion a valid argument. The UCI believes that it would benefit rider safety in some way by reducing the stress towards pinch points in the race. For example, in the Ronde van Vlaanderen, we know that the Molenberg is an important place to be in position at the front of the peloton. Every sports director is calling their riders and saying, get to the front, we gotta be in the first position for this climb, etc. That increases the risk, and it's more likely that a crash occurs as a consequence. Sure, I think that's a valid argument, especially if the riders also agree with that. And that brings us to the most important aspect of all of this, safety. Do the safety benefits of removing earpieces outweigh the safety risks of removing earpieces? And that brings us to the last week where we had the Tour de Pologne and the Vuelta a Burgos, two races where the UCI decided to test the restriction on earpieces by doing it the following way. One stage without earpieces and two stages where only 2 riders per team are allowed to have radio. Personally, I had mixed feelings about this test. First of all, I think it's a good thing to test stuff like this, to test new rules before permanently implementing them, especially because in the past, in 2011 and 2015, the UCI has tried to ban radios already, so it's not the first time they're doing this, but back then, they tried to do it instantly with a permanent rule without a testing phase. So it's much better to have a testing phase to see whether the riders like it or not. That being said, to test it at Tour de Polonia and Vuelta a Burgos is shocking to me. These are two races. If a person on the street asked me to name 5 races where safety has been a problem in cycling in the last 5 to 7 years, Tour de Polonia and Burgos are probably on the podium right now. So that selection is stupid because you're risking the lives of riders with decisions like this. Sure, one could say that it's better to test stuff like this in the worst possible scenario in races that have a reputation of not being the safest, but in my opinion, races that have played with the danger of riders in the past shouldn't be made more unsafe for the sake of a test like this. Anyway, that brings us to stage 3 of the Tour de Polonia, a stage in which the teams only had 2 earpieces per team, so 2 riders had radio per team. And it turned out to be a pretty chaotic stage, a medium mountain stage with quite a bit of crashes in it as well. And then the question logically arises, were the crashes avoidable if the riders had earpieces or not? Were there other things that riders noticed as a consequence of the restriction? Who knows? So I decided to ask 15 to 20 riders in the Tour de Polonia peloton after stage 3 for their opinion, what they thought about the restriction of earpieces. For the sake of this video, I've anonymized the input that the riders have given me, and I've compiled a list of concerns that they've brought forward towards me, and I'll go over every single concern one by one. So let's start off with a simple one. Concern 1, simple things have become a lot less simple. It's not possible to contact the team car in case of a mechanical or a crash. We've gone over that one in this video already. Anyway, that first concern is a bit of a quality of life issue, not necessarily safety related, but the next one, concern number 2, has a pinch of safety in there. So let's talk about it. When a rider has to go back to the car to get bidons for teammates and gels for teammates, etc., on paper what they do is they call into the radio and they say, I need an order of X amount of bidons for these riders and whatever that those other riders need. That order is done, and while the rider is moving to the back of the peloton, the team car is already moving up towards the back of the peloton. So that's happening. When they arrive at the back of the peloton, the team car is usually already at the front there, almost, and the exchange happens, and the rider goes back to the front with the bidons and the gels. Simple process. Now let's go through that same process without earpieces. A rider goes to the back of the peloton. During the process of moving to the back, the team car does not yet know that someone needs bidons, so is not moving up to the back of the convoy behind the peloton yet. So the car is still unknown at this point. Eventually, once the rider is at the back, the team car is informed that there's a rider that needs something at the back of the peloton, so the team car starts moving forward. We've already lost quite a bit of time. Now, the exchange happens, it's longer because the order was not done before the rider started moving back, so the person in the car needs to get everything together last minute, and then give it to the rider, and then eventually that rider moves up again. At the same time, not just one team is doing that, but multiple riders of multiple teams are doing the same exact thing. I feel like this combined with the factor that without earpieces, tactics don't happen through radio, so a rider needs to go towards the car and ask, what should we do in this situation? There's going to be so many more riders within the convoy at all time in a race without earpieces. So in my opinion, that increases a danger for safety, riders being around cars more. Anyway, so far, okay concerns, but not the biggest dangers yet. But that brings me to concern 3 and 4, and those are the ones where safety becomes an issue. Concern 3, if I crash into a ditch or fall into a ravine, I can't tell my team and they might not see me laying there. And another rider expanded on this, that in situations where a rider crashes into a ditch or a ravine, other riders tend to report to their team car that this happened so that the rider isn't left behind, that someone knows that the rider fell there. So that's an important thing to know. Plus, it's not a rare case. It has happened multiple times this year. During the last Giro d'Italia, Jente Biermans fell into a ravine, and it was because the companions in his group told their team car that there was a crash there, that they found Jente Biermans in time. Those team cars went to search for him and found him to get emergency services towards him. So earpieces played a vital role in finding Jente Biermans as fast as possible after that crash. And it's half ironic, but mostly unfortunate, that on stage 3 of this Tour de Polonia, the exact stage where the UCI is testing the restriction on earpieces, a similar situation somewhat happens. In the breakaway, there's two riders that crash, Pepijn Reinderink of Quickstep and Nicolas de Beaumarchais of Cofidis. Normally in this situation, the general race radio would report a crash of two riders. I'm not talking about the team radios, I'm talking about the general race radio. They would report the crash of two riders and name the numbers or the team of the riders. And therefore the team cars, the medical car, the ambulance would all know that a crash happened in that specific spot. But that's not a perfect system, because in this specific moment, only the crash of Pepijn Reinderink was reported, not de Beaumarchais, who was laying further behind the fence after a ditch. So it is possible for race radio, as proven by this stage, to miss a crash of a rider. And in the breakaway, riders were shouting around, help him, and they can't tell their team cars because they don't have radio communication to their team cars. So there can't be a situation like in the Giro with Biermans where their team cars end up helping the search for de Beaumarchais. Fortunately, de Beaumarchais was found in this specific occasion eventually, so he has spinal injuries, I think. Let's hope his recovery is as quick as possible and that it's relatively okay. But you get my point, right? This is a realistic issue in the sport that if I crash in a ditch, I can't tell my team and they might not see me laying there. That's a severe safety issue in races without earpieces. That brings me to the next concern number 4, another safety issue. There was a crash in the breakaway and the information didn't circulate in the peloton fast enough, so there was another crash in the peloton in the same corner. This was avoidable. Basically, one of the riders I spoke to said that when the crash in the breakaway happened, race radio told about the crash of Pepijn Reinderink, that same crash we just spoke about, to the team cars. The team cars then spoke to their two riders with earpieces and said, watch out, 45 seconds in front of you, there's a dangerous corner where the breakaway just crashed. And those riders with the earpieces didn't have enough time to then tell as much people as possible in the peloton for everyone to know that that would be a dangerous spot where someone has already crashed. So that's a consequence, in my opinion, of there not being earpieces for every single one of the riders. Said rider also confirmed to me that perhaps with everyone having earpieces, that crash could have been avoided. So after going through the concerns of the riders here, I ask you the same question again, the important question that I laid out in front of you earlier. Do the safety benefits of removing earpieces outweigh the dangers of removing earpieces? And comparing the two angles, I think the answer is pretty simple. Yes, a few riders said that there's a bit less stress when it comes to positioning without earpieces, but I went through pretty serious safety concerns now that severely outweigh any safety benefits. So in my opinion, it's definitely not safer without earpieces for riders in the peloton, and every single rider that I spoke to leaned towards less safe as well when I read their reactions. So yeah, removing earpieces or restricting earpieces in the way that the UCI has just tested at the Tour de Pologne doesn't seem like the right solution, but I started thinking, is there a solution that does work for both parties? On one end, the riders have two main problems. First of all, they want to hear important information like time gaps, like dangerous segments coming up that might cause a crash in the peloton, a landslide, race neutralization. They want to be able to hear that while they're in the peloton. Next to that, they want the ability to tell their team car about mechanicals, about crashes, so they want some kind of communication from them as a rider towards their team car. Meanwhile, the UCI thinks that DSs in team cars are puppet masters that control what riders do all the time, so they want to restrict the communication from the team car to the rider. But also they want to restrict the earpieces, the communication from team car to rider, to reduce the stress when it comes to positioning for pinch points in the race. So combining both the desires of the riders and the UCI, there is a theoretical solution, but I don't think it's practical. Theoretically, that ideal solution is a dual-channel radio for the riders where they would receive important race information from a neutral race radio that's the same for every single rider in the race, that is made by the organizers. So you know about time gaps, about race neutralizations, about dangerous corners coming up, etc. And the second channel on the radio would be that they could send out voice communications towards their team car about mechanicals or crashes. So they couldn't get responses from the team car. So the UCI is happy in that regard. Again, theoretically, that sounds like a great solution, but in practice, not so much, because I'm a rider. I say, I've got a mechanical. I want to hear from my radio that my team car heard that I have a mechanical. I want some confirmation because radios don't work all the time. They notoriously misbehave during races. So I'm not sure that my team car heard it. So there's all these small behavior things that I don't think this theoretical idea is actually practically possible. Honestly, in my opinion, the UCI should throw out their entire argument about unpredictability. This discussion should only be about safety. Does earpieces being present in cycling make races safer or not? And based on what I hear from riders, it sounds safer with earpieces. Lastly, I do want to talk about the drama. After the stage 3 of Tour de Pologne, there was quite a bit of drama on Twitter about this specific stage. Richard Plugge, the boss of Team Visma Leasebike, posted a tweet saying, "It was chaos today without radios. UCI Cycling cannot continue with the radio ban. It turns the race into a complete farce like we saw in the Olympics, where riders cannot call the car for basic assistance in case of a mechanical. Hopefully no one was too badly hurt today." Considering what the riders felt about that stage, I think that's a pretty fair post to make. But then there was a response from the UCI boss himself, David Lapartien, and he responded pretty laughably, I would describe it. "Hi Richard, you are caught in the act of fake news. Today's crashes at Tour de Pologne have nothing to do with the absence of radios and you know it. The riders were taken care of according to standards. Our priority at the UCI Cycling is safety. You want to keep the radios on to give instructions, not for safety. Sorry, but that's a dogshit response by the UCI boss." Especially because in this video, I've proven his tweet wrong. He says that the crash at Tour de Pologne have nothing to do with the absence of radios, and you know it. Well, I literally just went through testimonials from riders who say that there were crashes that could have been avoided if there were earpieces. A crash happening in the breakaway, that info not spreading fast enough in the peloton for them to be wary for a dangerous corner coming up, that's literally the consequence of there not being earpieces in every single rider's ears. And coincidentally, in that same corner, a crash happened in the peloton. The UCI performs a test on stage 3 of Tour de Pologne to see, okay, is this a good idea to restrict earpieces? Richard Plugge gives some feedback on that, whether he has an agenda behind it or not. He's speaking facts for David Lapartien to come out and say, you're spreading fake news while saying bullshit in his own tweet. I'm sorry, man, but this makes it sound as if David Lapartien and the UCI already made up their mind on whether they want to restrict radios, regardless of what happens in this test, because they don't care about feedback and criticism, rightful criticism anyway. Next to that, to me, it sounds like David Lapartien didn't do the bare minimum, the due diligence that I did for this video, which was go around towards riders of Tour de Pologne, even have people at the UCI do that in his place, and ask them about their experience that day, because they were pretty clear that they disagree with the tweet of David Lapartien in the first place. Honestly, this tweet is fucking disgusting. It makes it clear that David Lapartien cares more about the political side of things, the being right side of things, while other people care more about the safety of the riders, which is exactly what David should be caring about in the first place. So, come on man, do your fucking job. Anyway, that's my rant. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.